I'm Nuchy Mandel, speaking out of Earmont, New York, helping spread the beautiful light of spirituality across the world. The date of this recording is Sunday, March 25 of 2018. May my words and the expressions of my soul be gratifying to everyone who hears them. I pray that my ideas help pave a beautiful path in your journey of life. Thank you for tuning in. With us today is my beloved sister Gneshe Bron. Gneshe has been a longtime advocate for therapy and emotional development. She is currently studying for her GED and taking a course to be a peer specialist, as she hopes to be able to help many individuals with their community upbringing recovery process, as if she isn't already. I'm happy to have her on with us. She has a lot of insight to share, and I'm sure you can learn a lot from her, as I know I have. I'm grateful and feel blessed to have such a wonderful family. So welcome to my podcast, Gneshe. I'm glad to have you on. I hope this will be the start of many more opportunities that you may get to share your profound outlook with others.
Hi, Nuchy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Thank you.
Honored to be here.
So on 2 podcasts ago, I made a piece called Emotional or Spiritual Development. And it was a piece that kind of opened up the idea of focusing on emotional development, not just spiritual development, but more than that, it was focusing on emotional development before spiritual development. And I brought some cases that within the community and not just within the community, but of course that's what we're familiar with, so this is what we're talking about. People neglect their emotional development and kind of use spiritual development as an umbrella to say that they're all taken care of on all fronts. And that's what that whole podcast was about. And I didn't really get into the application of emotional development. I just kind of talk about the idea of emotional development versus spiritual development. But I don't really talk about how you practically work on emotional development. Now, I did mention therapy. I kind of just washed over it, and I also said that we were going to get back to therapy, the topic of therapy alone, and this is what we're going to do now, because to get more into a practical manner of what it means to be emotionally developed, or if you want to know how important it is, you could go back to that podcast. I believe that one of the main components of emotional development, especially if you grew up in the community or within any kind of setting that was damaging to your emotional self, then therapy is like the no-brainer. It's like the number one, it's the foundation, because you came from a crazy setting and now you realize that something's wrong, obviously. I mean, just you listening to this or even being interested in the topic means that you're searching for something beyond what you went through. You're searching for healing, you're searching for health, whatever it may be. And if you're at all interested, I would have to suggest that therapy is number one on that list. Now, therapy has this connotation to it. It has like this consensus attached to it by like anti-therapy goers, okay, if I could call it that. And they have like this, no, there's like this consensus like therapy attendees are part of a cult, or they're in some kind of wacko workshop and stuff like that. And it's not just if you grew up in the community that you might carry that outlook. For whatever reasons, there are different reasons why you might think that, or you might think, well, you're beyond that because you're Jewish and you have Hashem, or you might just not be aware of what it is, so it might be like a defense mechanism that you put up. Or you might say the people that you know that went to therapy only got worse and all that. There are so many different arguments that people create in order to not get help. And there are coherent and respectable answers to all of those defenses that make it null and void. And we're not really going to get into so many of those details. But that is the phenomenon. So you have this, what I'd like to call a very important part of emotional development, and that's going for help. And then you have the defense mechanism that's put up that's stopping people from going from help, or plain and simply, they're just not educated. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. We are freestyling this, hardly even following any footnotes, so it might end up being a little bit all over the place, but it's fun, creative, and we'll see where it takes us.
I want to tie into what you said about people going to therapy. So one piece is that people have shame. The more awareness there is about therapy and how it helps people, I think the less shame there is connected to going. But when people come out of a very close community, something like therapy has a lot of shame connected to it. I'm not really sure why, though.
That's a strong point.
Okay,
So you're saying the awareness of it alone, or the education of it would make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe because there's a sense of something being wrong with someone if they needed to go to therapy. And in a close community where people really care about what other people think of them. And it doesn't only happen in Jewish or religious, it happens in close-knit communities as well. Nobody wants to say that there's something wrong with them, or there's something, everyone's trying to put out a really strong front about who they are and what their family is. One of the misconceptions with therapy, I think, is that people don't understand how it's helpful to sit in a room and talk to somebody about their past or all their issues that they're having. And they don't understand how that could help them and guide them and help them grow as adults on this present day, wherever they are right now at this time. What happens when we talk to a third party about whatever it is that's going on is two things. One, the issues that we're having as adults is patterns that are replaying themselves from our childhoods into our adult lives. And it's hard for us to see it as adults, that it's something that we were doing as kids and developed as kids, but that's basically what it is. And secondly, when you're talking about it to a third party and you're hearing it out loud, very often you're able to see those patterns come together yourself. But secondly, if you're not able to, a third party who's removed from whatever issues it is that you're dealing with, they can see the patterns clearly and they can guide you the actions that you're doing and repeating again and again, which results in the same outcome.
All right, so those are some interesting points, and let me go back to one of the points that you made about it being within a community or within other communities. I kind of feel like it's not even confined to that. There's some kind of weird consensus attached to the whole therapy topic. Now, in the secular world, maybe it's a little bit less, and people are a little bit more open to it, but there's just something attached to that whole topic where people are like, well, maybe it's kind of like what you said, like you're trying to put on some kind of front. Now, on that, from a spiritual standpoint, being able to acknowledge when you're hurting, being able to acknowledge when you are in pain, being able to be real and honest with yourself, living a healthy and honest, real life is strength. And this is, it's a common misconception that people, I picture King David under, he was Rambo during the day and he was crying under his blanket at night. Don't confuse emotional with weak. Mm-hmm. And when you get to a certain level of emotional development, you come to realize that strength is beyond flexing your muscles. Strength is actually being honest with yourself mm-hmm. and those who you love and those around you. And that kind of ties a little bit into martyrdom, which is something that we wanted to talk about, because people want to say, I'm okay, when they're not okay. I could handle this when they can handle this. So what are your thoughts when it comes to that, especially with individuals leaving the ultra-Orthodox community? I don't need help, I'm fine, but you're not fine, because we know at 25 years old you're having a life crisis, and you're freaking out about a million different things. You don't know where you're going, where you're coming from, what happened. A million other scenarios you can learn more about if you check out my videos about OTD on YouTube. But we know you're not okay, and this ties into, like I said, martyrdom. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like the piece that you said about being able to let go and being in touch with reality. People are so afraid to, I mean, I can speak for myself, so afraid to see the gray area in their life. So for people that are so, always had to be strong, always saw things as black and white, to be able to let go, to be able to be vulnerable, to be weak, well, we saw it as weak, but really to kind of let go and feel the emotions and cry is major strength.
Right, that is how I always felt, and well, I've come to feel that way. Obviously, if we backtrack 10 years, we have to understand that we're not like that as humans, especially the way that we grew up, not around the best of scenarios and upbringing. We're not by default open and understanding to these concepts. But as the years went by, and I naturally found myself looking into these various topics that I find intriguing, and they led me to a life and a path of health. Now, to me, it's a no-brainer, but people who are still struggling with it are stuck in that feeling, but there are ways to break out of it. And it's just, it's a huge misconception. Strength is honesty. Honesty about your emotional and spiritual being, about even your physical being. Strength is expression of that honesty. Strength is pure expression of what you really are, want, and desire in life, as opposed to the opposite, which is lies, hiding behind your own shadow, making things up,
living a fake life,
image, persona, all these different things that are like responses to your unhealthy self. So bringing all of that together, if we're able to actually acknowledge that and open up our hearts and minds to at least acknowledge the fabric of it, the truth of it, even if we can't yet get to the point of living it, right? There's a difference between knowing something and living something. There's a difference between learning something and understanding something. And there's like a divide. Now in life, we're always trying to close that gap, but at least the initial stages I would propose are that you first acknowledge that there is some truth behind it, and bringing that back to therapy. We'll get back to martyrdom soon, because martyrdom is being a martyr, which is almost every person leaving this community, is very complex in its own right, and we want to break that open a little bit more. But and we'll get back to that, but bringing this back to therapy, I mean, just on a basic level, going to therapy will begin to open you up. But here's a very interesting but. Doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a week or two. I spoke to so many people who go to therapy for a couple of weeks or like a month or two. I don't none of that. Yeah. It's like, don't tell me you quit cigarettes for a month and nothing changed in your life. Like, good things take time, take a lot of time. So, I don't want to get into dispelling like I said, there's so many excuses. When we go on that level of excuses, like, why do I need therapy? Hashem, he's my therapist, or I have there's like a list of excuses. And originally, when I was going to do this piece, I was really going to dispel and really crack open all of those silly arguments and dispel them. But now that we're kind of freestyling and we're just letting it flow as it comes to us, I'm gonna skip that because it doesn't come naturally right now. I will get back to that one day. There are answers to all of those. If you could call it a real outlook, like your defense, your intellectual defense is that you don't need a therapist because you have Hashem. There are answers to that.
Well, I do want to say that people that believe in Hashem, it's definitely an important piece of your connection with yourself. But it's not going to help you you yourself can't help yourself break your own cycles. Most of the time we don't see our own cycles. One of the best things to bring us to awareness is listening to our inner voice. When we're being a martyr, we're not usually feeling happy. Get in touch with how your physical body is feeling. If you're feeling light and happy and excited to do things, that's your physical body telling you that what you're doing is in sync with your subconscious mind. But if you're feeling irritable and anxious and angry, that's your body, your physical body telling you your subconscious mind is not at peace with whatever it is that you're doing. Now, touching on the therapy piece, it takes time to connect to a therapist. You can't take 24 years of your life, or even 20 years, or even 18 years of your life, and turn it around in one session. Sometimes you'll end up with a therapist who gets you to one destination, and then it's time to look for another therapist to get you to the next destination. So to go into therapy knowing that it's a process, you have to have a lot of patience with yourself.
I think those are all some really strong and deep points, and I say deep because I feel like I understand, and what you're saying resonates with me, and it's kind of like a no-brainer to me. But I feel like someone who has never went for help, someone who is in the process of, let's say, leaving the community or struggling with inner turmoil, and never really like played with any kind of self-help, they potentially have no clue what we're talking about. It's like when you go for help, and anyone who has gone for help would agree and would kind of like nod their head like, yeah, that makes sense. We know that. That's, these are like the ABCs of being on a healthy journey and going for help. Mm-hmm. But anyone who has never tasted those waters is like, what in God's green earth are they even talking about? It sounds like you know what. Sounds like a whole bunch of fluff.
Well, that's where I again come back to my point of, what does your physical life look like? Do you have a job? Are you happy? Are your relationships going well between your friends, between your family? And if the answer is no, then you know that there is issues that need to be worked on and faced.
Right, so I feel like one of the defenses for people who have never tasted the waters, as I said, and a natural defense is martyrdom, and especially because of how we grew up. So they'll go into saying, I don't need the help, but there is an other side to that coin. Maybe you could explain the other side to that coin.
Well, the real term of martyrdom or martyr complex is associated with the term victim complex. The desire, the feeling of being a martyr for his or her own sake, seeking out suffering or persecution because it either feeds a psychological need or a desire to avoid responsibility. Other martyr complexes involve willful suffering in the name of love or duty. And I think that's a very important piece that ties into our community.
The duty part.
The duty part, out of
right.
love. This has been observed in women, especially in poor families, as well as codependent or abusive relationships. In a person who's been emotionally abused, they will subconsciously seek suffering in adulthood. They will use language and behavior that shows they are willing to be abused, as that is what they are conditioned to do. In a person from a poor house, they may work and overwork to make extra money, even if the overtime is wearing them out and leaving them no time for family or self-care. They feel fulfilled by overworking as it fills the void of not having enough. Martyrdom is the act of being needed, but then essentially the person who's the martyr ends up feeling like a victim. They end up feeling used and abused. Codependent people will stand by someone who is an alcoholic or other obsessive behavior. They will cover for them because the act of being needed by someone else fulfills their own worthless feelings. abusive relationships because it might fill a feeling of being strong and not giving up, when in such a case, letting go and falling apart would really build their strength, which is what we talked about earlier. Being able to let go and fall apart, knowing that you don't always have to be the rock. Martyrs feel elated, filled up or warm and fuzzy inside when they talk about the struggles they have but aren't looking for solutions. The act of speaking about it in itself fills the void and pumps them up. Just like any of the behavior they do, again, consciously or subconsciously, all these acts are coping mechanisms to fill the void within themselves. People may use religious practices or self-imposed limitations as martyrs, and then talk about it as it makes them feel worthy and good about themselves.
So that was a nice piece. I know you wrote it when we initially spoke about talking about this topic. So if I got this right, and I'm going to try to tie in your explanation to what I was saying. If you grew up, say, in the ultra-Orthodox community and were exposed to many levels of abuse as a child, you were essentially conditioned a certain way. Now, if we fast forward to adulthood, this conditioning takes precedence over health and healing, which means we are dealing with tens of thousands of adults who not only have been through hell growing up, but are now martyrs.
Yes, it takes precedence because the child subconsciously finds a way to protect itself from the environment that it's in. The child feels unsafe subconsciously. The child finds ways to cope with it through behaviors.
And one of those behaviors
are martyrdom.
Interesting.
Overcompensating by showing how much they can do and how helpful they could be at home, or doing really, really well on all their personal work in school.
That's interesting. Also very, very common. So you think that children who go out of the way to try to impress their parents or teacher or anything along those lines may fall into this category as well a little bit?
Yes. We specifically talked about poverty, impoverished families. Very often you'll see young teenagers coming into the working world talking about helping their parents get out of their poverty. That's a form of martyrdom. Children that feel guilt or helplessness with their parents' situation. That might have been parents putting their burdens on their children.
And that's also kind of glorified in 21st century.
Yeah.
Like, do it for your family, do it for your mother, you know, because she didn't succeed, so you have to do it for her.
Yeah. Or if the father wasn't successful, and the mother always worked hard, and then the children grow up with guilt that their mother that they love is working so hard.
I definitely see the correlation to martyrdom. I do feel like there are probably many aspects that play a role in every person. It's different, right? But it's definitely there. But on a basic level, just to unwind a little bit, just any type of feeling, any type of cover-up, and this is very hard to do if you're not self-aware. What we want to begin to do, because what are we doing here? We're talking about going for help and starting a journey of health, a journey of healing. So right on the outset of that, you don't have these profound levels of complete control and understanding even.
Yeah.
Well, so on a really basic level, what you could do is
get in touch with your physical body.
And think about the most basic form of martyrdom, which is, I don't need help, I'm okay, I'm not hurt. Get past that.
Well, add it up. If you think and believe that way, but if your life is not adding up, if you're not getting to the
do the math.
If you're not getting to the goals that you want, the dreams that you dream, then something's not adding up. You're blocking yourself. Essentially, you're blocking yourself from success.
Well, that's a good way to measure whether or not your own messages are true or not. So if you're telling yourself you're okay, look at your life.
Yeah.
You're okay? How happy are you? How successful are you? How are you? How is your relationship with your children, your friends, your family, your siblings, your boss, anyone? So that's a good good measuring
do you wake
stick.
up feeling good?
Right. And I would say to just start at the very basic level of that before you try to delve into any of the deeper levels of it, which is a little bit hard to comprehend right on the outset. Just basics. We were all like that. We all come from that. It's not...
Absolutely. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. There's no pain
It was your inner child protecting you when it needed to protect you. And what you need to realize as an adult is you're safe now, and it's okay now to let go of that. To be thankful that it got you through those years that it needed to. And now as an adult, you're in a better place and you don't need that peace. You don't need that peace any longer to keep you going.
It's part of growing up.
It's part of growing up.
Like there's this
Learning
famous
to let go.
quote that like, I forget what it is exactly, but it kind of says something like, there's a time when crying is strong, and then there's a time when not crying is strong, or whatever,
Absolutely.
something along those lines. But the point remains, you know,
if you're a person who has pride in saying I never cry or nothing is hard for me, that might be a indication to dig deeper.
Yeah. And for someone like that, leveling up might actually be
letting go
and actually acknowledging and actually saying I'm in pain. And for someone who is always in pain and has no problem acknowledging it, for them leveling up might be standing up to the pain and saying, no, I'm not going to feel pain.
Absolutely.
I'm done with pain. So what is true for one might not be true for another, or at least not at the same time in life.
Correct. It's really about getting in touch with what your struggles are. Getting in reality. What is your reality? When you finish helping someone or when you finish working really, really hard, do you feel good about yourself? Is that high that you have a natural high, or is it so high and then when it passes you come crashing down? That's your physical body telling you that something isn't right.
And why are you doing it? Do you feel an obligation, a duty, or do you do it because you love life and you love living and you love doing what you do?
Well, there is two pieces. On the one hand, you might have a really high, a very high of helping someone else, of working really, really hard. But if that high is an unnatural high, that it's so high that it makes you feel so good, it's like a drug. When that high wears off, you're always looking for the next thing to fill it, to make you feel high again. So that's one way that your physical body will react. The other way is that you work really, really, really hard as a martyr, and you just feel depleted and exhausted after.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it really goes back to what your physical body is telling you, which I call your inner voice. Getting in touch with your inner voice is going to be your biggest gift.
So there needs to be some kind of medium. If you're too high, it's like they say, if it's too good to be true,
and it's not.
it's
not that good.
Right. And
there is a healthy balance.
That's what you're saying.
There's a healthy balance, and going back to what we said in the introduction, these kind of changes take years. If you spend 18, 19, 20, 25, 30 years protecting yourself by being a martyr, you have to give yourself at least 3-4 years working through that stuff. It takes a lot of patience, and you have to have empathy towards yourself. Compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion.
I think I've said on past podcasts about my idea of 3 or 4 years of 3 to 4 hours a day, and most people are not going to put in that kind of time. And if you're not putting in that kind of time, you have to really expect it to take even longer.
Yeah.
Real significant change, changing your life, really getting healthy on all fronts, takes years. And obviously it depends how much you dedicate to it, but a regular busy person who has a life, family, a schedule, is not going to dedicate too much to it, or a really sufficient amount. So you have to be in it for the long run. It's not like you're dedicating yourself to college here. you have a life, but at the same time you want to be happy, you want to feel healthier, you want to get help, you want to feel normal, you want to feel like a person.
Well, even if you give an hour a week and then spend some time thinking about it even during the week.
So that's one of the ideas of therapy, that
you committed to it. You go.
If you even go once a week, what it's doing essentially is making you think about your emotional self, your emotional being, every week. I mean, think about it. If you're in your regular routine, you're not thinking about your emotional well-being because you're busy. Family, children, life, business, whatever your obligations are. You're not thinking about your emotional health or your emotional state of being. If you go to therapy, let's say once a week or even every other week, then every other week you're forced to think about stuff that you wouldn't otherwise think about. And what a therapist does, is they ask the right questions. Essentially, at its finest, that is what they're doing. They're asking the right questions and giving insight, providing advice, and a listening ear, amongst other things. But if I had to tell you what I felt like a good therapist does, I would say that they ask the right questions.
To help you break open.
They ask you questions that you would never think of, you would never even think to ponder in that direction. And they're basically broadening your own horizons. That's why, even if you can't commit to any kind of education or getting help on a daily basis, if you even go once a week or once every other week, then you're at least forcing yourself on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to think about your emotional. And by thinking about it, you will automatically make decisions to kind of further yourself in a way that will work on it, or get better at it, or improve on various aspects. And by the way, the idea that you don't have time for therapy and all that stuff, you know, they have online therapy. They have a platform called Talkspace and various other platforms like it, where you could have your therapist in your pocket. You could be laying in bed right before you go to sleep, one message, one feeling, one thought, one frustration, one joyous moment. Just share it, just talk. We live in modern times, modern technology. We don't have to create excuses. As I said before, I'm not going to get into all the excuses and start disputing them. This is just a little example of one of them.
I feel like one big one comes from fear. Fear of revisiting painful events.
Oh, for sure.
I would say that's a big one. I think what people have to remember is that you go slow and you don't open up the really painful things until you're comfortable with a therapist, and it will come out naturally. Nobody's forcing anyone to talk about things that they can't talk about.
And how about focus on the reward? You know, if you think about the reward of finally actually getting past those insecurities and actually opening up.
Yeah, you have freedom.
Look at the people who are committed to getting help and they've gone for help for years. Why they advocate for therapy? Why does anyone who goes to therapy for years, usually, more times than not, advocate for therapy? Why? What do they feel and experience that you're not after going for a week or never going at all?
Yeah.
Because if you go for long enough, and you will get past the insecurities and you will slowly open up, the reward is way up there. The frequency of the reward, feeling healthy, feeling free, feeling like you've conquered those insecurities and many others, is beyond your imagination. If you're in a state of confusion or uncertainty, then you do not understand what it means, this level of reward. Think about it. Think about how freeing it would be to actually get there.
To not have to hide it, to let it go.
Yeah. So,
hiding is one of the biggest, things that hold people back. The fact that they feel like they have to hide it, or they can't talk about it.
Or like we said, it's not there, but we know it is there. I'm not in pain. I'm fine. And then, another easy indicator is if your actions contradict your statements.
Yeah.
You say you're fine, but you're getting angry. You say you're okay, but you're getting depressed.
You say you're okay and you're losing your job.
Right.
You say you're okay and you can't keep a relationship.
You can't say you're okay.
If your actions are
right,
saying something
right.
else, that's again going back to your physical body, showing you that something isn't adding up.
Right. It's full circle. I mean, talking about these things in an unrefined manner will take us in circles, but it will, as you see, it circles around and around. And anyone who has taken the time and patience to get involved, for their own sake, it's for your own sake, has seen major, major improvements.
People have to understand also that sometimes therapy is painful.
That is essentially the good type of pain, the pain of cleanse, the pain of getting cleansed, In the spiritual world, we're very familiar with that kind of pain because it's similar to what we believe tribulations does, or going through hardships. It's to help you level up. It's to help you to help make you a better person, to help get you to a better place. You have to go through certain pains, and it's no different when it comes to therapy and going through your hardships.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a certain place, and I know this intimately with myself, where I could fall into a comfortable space of, for example, and it's a totally simple and unrelated idea, but it ties into what we're talking about here. For example, I'm not so comfortable with, let's say, heights, depending when. I don't have a problem like with airplanes, but I don't want to go skydiving. Okay. For example, the thought of free falling or just like lunging myself out and letting go. Let's just call it letting go. I have an innate fear of letting go.
Okay.
All right. So what I could do is, when I'm in my comfortable space, or wanting to stay in my comfortable space, I tell myself I'm never going to go skydiving. And
in order to feel safe.
Right, and I live within that. And I stay within that, and it's fine. I don't like skydiving. There's nothing that pulls me to want to go. I'm in love with gravity. I just love being down here.
Yeah.
Now, that's the standard. I feel like that's where most people are at naturally, doing whatever they have to be safe.
We call it comfortable with the uncomfortable. They're not in a good place. You're not in a good place in your life, but it's what you know. You're familiar with it, so you're comfortable with your uncomfortable.
Well, it's getting comfortable with
your
fears.
Right.
And embracing it.
What you have to do is become uncomfortable to get to your new comfortable.
Right. And that's exactly what I wanted to get to, that because I know what I know and I understand all of these concepts, this was just last year, I challenged my own thought process and I said, why don't I just stop saying that I'm never going to go skydiving, and why don't I just leave that possibility open? Now, I'm still not comfortable right now going skydiving. I didn't do it yet, and I don't plan on doing it.
Right.
But I'm not closing the door to it, because now I understand, you know what? I don't want any fears to control me. Rather, if I do ever feel the desire to want to do something, I should be able to challenge it. And this comes back to exactly the thing with therapy. If it's, don't get comfortable with being
with avoiding
with a fear. Don't get comfortable with a fear.
Yeah.
Leave the door open so that when the time is right and you realize that you do want or need or could use the help,
you can go for it.
You could go for it. So to finish up, I guess I'd just like to say that any help, any stride in the right direction is better than
stagnant.
Exactly. I personally advocate for any form of positive growth, spiritual or emotional, physical development. You'll never see me make fun of therapy. You'll never see me make fun of individuals who go to intense therapeutic workshops. Never. Why? Because they're trying to work on themselves, and that puts them light years ahead of a person on the sidelines mocking their efforts. It doesn't matter if they're making the wrong choices in the beginning or if they're attending the wrong groups. What matters are the intentions.
They're opening the door.
God will see to it that they find the right place and path eventually. I'm saying this because
when you're looking,
because of the naysayers. It's like people like making fun. Oh, he went to that place. Oh, he's going there. Why is he getting caught up?
Yeah. Let him be on his journey.
Right. Don't get too caught up in the right one, this one, that one.
Everyone's journey, it takes time.
First start.
Yeah.
Have the desire. Go in the right direction. If you end up in some weird places, some weird outlooks, some weird positive growth that doesn't vibe with you,
right,
it'll sort itself out. But the main thing is to go in the right direction, and you will start feeling better.
Yeah.
As anyone who has gone for a significant amount of time can testify. So again, thank you for listening. I urge you, if you could use it, if it'll help you, look into it. Like I said, talk space. You don't have time. You can't. In the Jewish community, you have like refuah. They have these places that'll do it on your insurance. They'll cover it for you. Refuah Health Center, I think, has, or if you're on. There's so many different outlets and ways to get help, but don't just sit in one spot. Actually begin to pursue and to make a better life with yourself, for yourself, and you'll start to feel so much better. Thank you for tuning in. Gneshe, again, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
And if you have any comments or feedback, feel free to share them, put them on YouTube, and we'll try to respond accordingly. Thank you, and God bless you.